And we are live. Welcome back to Movie Guys Improvise, the MGI podcast. You are listening to Faerhad Targaryen.
And Realms.
Hi, I'm very happy to have another guest host with us today, Realms. He's got his own YouTube channel as well, mostly anime-based content. It's great. You should go and check it out. I'll link it in the description below, as well as a link to his Instagram handle as well. So yeah, definitely go and check that out. Now, last week we were talking about a classic comedy from the 90s called Office Space. This week I wanted to talk about one of my favorite comedies in general, also a comedy from the 90s known as My Cousin Vinny. I've actually seen this movie a ton of times and it still holds up as maybe one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, beat for beat. Like so many of the comedic moments are really hold up for me. But Realms, I think when I was talking to you about this episode and this movie, you hadn't yet heard about it or haven't seen it, but for preparation of this episode, you had a chance to see it. So, what were your first impressions of it?
I felt like it was definitely a feel-good movie. It's really good for a date night, and it had me laughing at a lot of points.
Nice. Were you big on comedies before, like courtroom movies? Because that's another thing about me is that like in general, I like myself good courtroom movies, courtroom dramas. Not that this is a drama, but I like courtroom movies. So, what is your taste? I guess we should also talk about like your general taste in movies. Like when you think about like if you get into the mood of watching a movie, what's the first kind of movie that you like getting into?
I don't know if I have a particular type or not, but as long as it just draws in my attention, like I guess action usually draws my attention and comedy.
Cool, interesting. Yeah, for me, comedy is not really my biggest thing, but this is a movie that's so funny to me that it's something that I can definitely get into. But yeah, for me, comedy wouldn't be my first choice. A movie like a comedy wouldn't be my first choice either. It'd probably be action for me as well. But cool, awesome. So yeah, I want to talk more about your YouTube channel toward the end of this episode. But for now, just wanted to get into the conversation of this movie. It starts off with two college kids going south, like two NYU students going south, because they had both gotten scholarships to UCLA, but they figured just to check out the scenery, they would go south. They would take the scenic route, which would be going down south to Alabama. Ralph Macchio plays Bill Gambini, and Mitchell Whitfield plays Dan Rothenstein, the two kids who get arrested for shooting the clerk at the sack of suds. So the thing about how they were arrested in the first place, honestly, for me, the first fallacy that I would give this movie is the entire time that they were in the police station, right? No, there was no scene, no particular part where we see any like the sheriff Fowley saying, "You know why you're here, right?" about the murder. It was pretty much assumed. They never say, you know, when did you shoot him? Why did you shoot him? That was like later on after he was questioning, I shot the clerk. You know what I mean? Yeah. So and while they were driving around, they were kind of making fun of the South. There was a sign that said dirt for sale, free horse manure, and then there was this truck with giant logs that they went around. There was even a Confederate flag on a house. So I'm like, wow, they're really they were really taking digs at the South in general here. But yeah, so they think that they're getting arrested for a can of tuna. That's what they think it's about. So they're just assuming that that's what it's about. So it wasn't until the sheriff asks him, you know, at what point did you decide to shoot him? And Billy is like, I shot the clerk. I shot the clerk. It's funny, yeah. It was crazy that's how it went down. But then that's when they understand what's actually happening, and he calls his mom to explain to her the situation. It turns out that they have a lawyer in the family, and that's my cousin Vinny. So That's when we cut to Vinny on his way south. I really like how when his face first appears on screen, like the beat kind of drops to the song that's playing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I thought that was cool as well. And throughout the movie, they drop little hints on how intelligent and educated his fiancee Lisa Vito is on automotives.
It actually surprised me they didn't want to pick her as the attorney.
Yeah, unfortunately, she is not the one who went to law school, but she seemed very interested on everything that was going on. Like she really, really wanted to help out, and she ends up being the key to the victory in this case, in the end, right? So as the movie progressed, there was this other funny scene that happened with when Vinny comes to visit them in jail. Stan is thinking that Vinny is that Bubba guy in the jail who will protect you, but it would be the sex slave. You know what I mean? That whole
They thought he was one of them.
yeah, this whole this whole movie was pretty much based on. I read a YouTube comment saying this whole movie is based on miscommunication, which it was. That's kind of exactly what it was. Stan meets Vinny. Billy is reunited with Vinny, and then they talk about how they're going to handle the case. So another thing that I didn't really understand is, you've heard the saying innocent until proven guilty, right?
Yeah.
So what I never understood about, I guess, the justice system in America is they were arrested, but they haven't been proven guilty yet. But then why were they being treated as guilty? Like they were already being put in jail while waiting for trial. You get what I mean? I didn't really understand that.
I feel like that's probably like a precautionary method, so that the person that they detain doesn't go out there and either try to get away or commit another crime. But at the same time, it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it that way, but that definitely could be part of that could explain why, as a safety measure, they have those who are charged, not necessarily convicted, but those charged, be put in jail while they were waiting for the trial to begin. So, speaking of the trial and the pre-trial, a couple of things I didn't understand there. So I think once we get into the second act of the movie, we really see that Vinny's a good lawyer. Like he really hits it out of the park with every witness that he questions. Like the first witness, it was the whole 20 minutes to make grits, right? Like it takes 20 minutes to make grits. So how could it take you 5 minutes if it takes 20 minutes to make? The second witness, he had a dirty window, a crud-covered screen. There were trees in his view with all the leaves, and then 7 bushes. The third witness was the lady with the really thick glasses, right? And then she ended up happening that her vision was, as Vinny puts it, out of whack, and she needed thicker glasses. So Vinny pretty much discredits each witness and their testimony. My question here, and I want to know your opinion as well, couldn't Vinny have asked these questions in the pre-trial?
He could have asked, but he clearly wasn't aware of the things that he was allowed to do and not to do in an actual trial. Like, as you said, in the second act, he basically pulled the Drake on him. He said, I just flipped the switch. Like, him in the second act and him in the first act, you would not think they were the same person.
That's a good way of putting it. He thought he had to finesse the prosecutor in order to get all of his files. And then his fiance gives him a reality check and saying that it's called disclosure, you dickhead. She was really calling him out on it, which he deserved, because he was kind of being a dickhead for a while throughout this movie. So then toward the end of the third act, the prosecutor brings in an expert on automotives, George Wilbur, who talks about the tires in this case, and it kind of flips the switch again for Vinny, because he tries to say that it wasn't entirely appropriate having this witness be put on trial now, because he didn't have enough time to cross-examine the witness, but the judge overrules him. So do you think the judge was being biased here, or do you think it was justified in the judge saying overruled?
I don't know if I would say it was justified, but I do think maybe just the perception that he had of Vinny kind of made him disregard him. He didn't take him as serious as he should have.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I agree there. It could be just because of Vinny's behavior that the judge just wasn't taking him seriously. That reminds me... Oh, man. That reminds me of another thing that I actually wanted to ask. You know how Vinny was held in contempt so many times in this movie?
Yep.
So, the third time that he was held in contempt, it was because it all started because he and his fiancée decided to sleep in the car under the stars and make it all romantic, but Vinny didn't see any stars, and then it stormed. It was a rainy night. He wakes up, and then he ends up getting covered in mud after he gets out of his car. Then after that, he goes into the trunk of his car, finds his suit, and then he flips his suit out of the car, and it falls in the mud.
As soon as he did it, I was like, tell me that wasn't his suit. He's like, what was that? She's like, the suit.
Yeah, she was like, oh, I thought it would be a nice surprise having a nice clean suit for your first day on trial, like, being lawyer on trial. But then the whole conundrum starts where he has to go and shower and then get a new suit because the suit would not be cleaned in time, right? So Lisa goes to a secondhand store and gets him I don't know what kind of suit you would call the suit that he was wearing. You know what I mean? Like what would you call that suit? Was it like it wasn't a clown suit, it wasn't a Joker suit, or like what kind of suit was it? It wasn't appropriate for court.
Man, if you ever seen the Wayans Brothers show, that would be a suit that their father would wear. Pops.
Now, I did see a few episodes of Wayans Brothers, and I know who you're talking about, and yeah, that would be a suit that Pops would wear, but Pops wasn't a lawyer, was he?
Nah, that's just a tacky suit.
Yeah, it was good. It was a nice suit, though. I wish I had a suit like that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing with that, though. So Vinny was held in contempt many times, but the judge thought this, like, when he showed up in court wearing that suit, he asked him, "Are you mocking me with that outfit?" And Vinny was like, "No, I'm not." And then the judge was like, "Okay, so explain that outfit." And then Vinny explains. He tells the truth. He tells him exactly what was going on there. He was like, "All right, I have a suit. You've seen it, but now it's covered in mud. So I had to get it dry cleaned, but obviously I can't get it dry cleaned within the hour. So I had to get a new suit for you. The problem is the only store in this town that sells suits is closed because everybody there has the flu. The whole store has the flu. So I had to get this from a secondhand store. So it was either wear the leather jacket, which I know you hate, or this. So I wore this ridiculous thing for you." That was the truth. He was there telling the truth. But then the judge tells him that he's on drugs and holds him in contempt anyway. I honestly don't think that was fair. He was held in contempt twice before that because of the whole guilty, not guilty thing. It sounded like he was treating the arraignment process as the actual trial because he was trying to get it dismissed. And then after that, he didn't take the judge seriously on what he was supposed to be wearing. Again, he should have. But then this time, it wasn't like, he had no other choice. But the judge held him in contempt anyway. I didn't think that was fair.
No appreciation.
Maybe he was just trying to. Maybe this was just the movie trying to be funny for another time because he curses under his breath. He's like, "Well, that's a fucking surprise," and the judge was like, "What did you say?" So I was on Vinny's side in that case. I think the judge was being a little bit unfair, but that's just me.
Yeah, definitely on that one.
So the movie progresses, and the entire time Lisa's trying to just gain knowledge on how things work. She even reads that book that the judge gave Vinny, and Vinny catches her with that, and he's like, "Do me a favor, okay? Don't read this book," and closes it in her face, which that wasn't cool. She brings him a bunch of pictures and says, "How can I help?" And he blows up on her with all those pictures, and she's like, "That's it, I'm out of here." And then she just kind of leaves because she's just stammering with the way that he's behaving with her. But she ends up being the key part of the key to victory in this whole case, right? Vinny looks at the picture and he has an epiphany in his head. He asks Sheriff Fowley to do some investigation on his own, and then he calls Lisa to the stand. And it's thanks to Lisa's testimony of the whole 1964 Buick Skylark versus the 1963 Pontiac Tempest that ends up beating the whole entire case, because the defense's argument was that two identical 1964 Buick Skylarks showed up. The quick plot twist being the defense is wrong because those tire marks were not made by a 1964 Buick Skylark. She says that's a fact. That's definitely a fact. And she goes on to have this brilliant explanation about positive traction and independent rear suspension, how only two cars, the Skylark and the Tempest, had the same body length, height, width, weight, wheelbase, wheel track. And that after her testimony, Vinny calls George Wilbur back on and says that, is there any way that the Buick, the defendant's Buick, made those tire marks? And then he says no. Then he answers it by saying no after that. So here's the thing. After George Wilbur's second time on the stand, Vinny calls Sheriff Fowley back on stage. But here's my question. Do you think Lisa's testimony was enough to drop all charges? Or do you think the extra bit at the end with putting the sheriff back on stage was necessary? In terms of if this was a real life thing.
I would say what she said was definitely enough to at least discredit the case. And I think that last part was just without a shadow of a doubt, like, definite proof.
Yeah, definite proof that these guys they weren't the ones who did it. And then the charges were dropped and everybody celebrates. It's a happy ending. It's a very, very happy ending. That happens, and then Vinny is scrambling to leave because he knows that the judge is after him over the whole Jerry Gallo and Jerry Callow thing.
He was hauling ass.
But she helped him out. Lisa helped him out once again because she made a call to his lawyer friend in Brooklyn, who made up a whole bunch of publishing about a very famous Jerry Callow lawyer in New York. And he's like, oh, well, I wanted to win my first case without any help. And she's saying, oh, well, I'm sorry for shattering your dreams. Let's say you always win your cases, but you need someone's help. So you always have to go up to someone and say thank you at the end. So that was, yeah. And she goes and says, oh my God, what a fucking nightmare that would be. And then they just talk about their wedding plans, because the plan was, after he wins his first case, they would go ahead and get married. And that's it. That's how the movie ends. So I thought, besides in the beginning how I felt like nobody mentioned to Billy and Stan how there was a murder that happened, so they had no idea about it, how nobody mentioned that. I thought that was kind of a flaw. There was one thing that the prosecutor was saying during his opening statement that I thought was kind of questionable. He said something like a verdict. He was calling the jury a verdict, which they are. And he was focusing on that word and how the definition of that word comes from Old English, from, where all of our ancestors came from. And then the scene cuts to a black lady on the jury, and the look on her face, like her ancestors didn't come from England. So that was just kind of a weird thing for him to say. But I guess that's just a Southern mentality. I don't know. There a lot of the people on the jury were black. There were like a lot minor black characters, and there was even someone on the stand that was black. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just a Southern thing, a Southern mentality, or the movie trying to be funny with the whole, oh yeah, racist South, racist inconsiderate South.
Could be.
Yeah, but yeah, I think. But this movie, at the end of the day, is probably one of my favorite comedies ever. I'm not a huge fan of comedies in general, but this is one of my favorite movies, period. I'm more into like movie that are series. Like I'm one of those guys who will still buy physical media sometimes, but only if it's a series. Otherwise, I would just like stream it or rent it or something like that. But My Cousin Vinny, to me, is close to being a masterpiece. Some people might consider it a masterpiece. I don't know. Maybe if I had more time to evaluate it myself, I would consider it as such. But since we're nearing the end of today's episode, I just wanted to go into ratings. And I would give My Cousin Vinny a solid 9 out of 10. What do you think?
I think I'm gonna go ahead and give it an 8.5.
8.5. That's still a pretty high score. So yeah, for first like this, like me talking to you about it was the first time you heard of it and saw it, and that's a pretty high score, which means you probably have a pretty high opinion of the movie too.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Like, actually, I wanted to touch back to that ending part where she was making the call and putting in that information of his lawyer name. Like, that was a big testament to how strong their relationship was, because she was furious with this man, yet she still went and tried to help him out. And then
yeah, I didn't even yeah. Please continue. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying what I was gonna say is that like I didn't even catch it. Like yeah, when she was on the phone, she was making that call to go from Jerry, like that whole Jerry Gallagher like Hal thing. That was the phone call. I didn't even catch that. But yeah, that was I've seen this movie so many times and I never caught that. So it's awesome. Good eye there, and good ear for catching that. She was loyal. She was really really loyal. She was giving him a reality check so many times. Like every time she bailed him out, saying you fucking up this case or what? And then Vinny is like, I know I'm fucking up a little bit. I know I just came out of jail. I don't need this right now. And then she starts being sarcastic. Oh yeah, you were great back there. You were the way you handled the judge.
Uh-huh.
And then there was also the whole subplot of how she was playing pool and she won, and then the guy just wouldn't pay her. And he confronted the guy and was saying, I'll take the $200. I'll kick your ass, and I'll take the $200. But he was kind of calling his bluff, right? Saying, show me the money. This happened like 2 or 3 times. Show me the money. And he's like, all right, get the money, then we'll fight. Then he claims to have the money and is like, okay, show it to me. How do I know that's not a bunch of ones with a 20 wrapped around it? So
that was such a strange yet still funny interaction between them.
Yeah. And then he jumps on that guy, like punches him one time, and that's it. That's how they handle it. Like he just punches a dude once, and and he collects the $200. I guess that was just the movie being a little bit comedic, because I don't know if they were trying to imply that he has some actual fighting skills. You know what I mean?
I can't really see that playing out that way in real life. Like, who comes up to a guy and he says, nah, I need you to go get the money and then we can fight. Like, nah, if you're leaving me right now and I got the money, I'm not coming back.
That was just the movie having its comedic moments and the comedic narrative. But yeah, I agree with you. He was being pretty mean to her, but she was loyal. She loved him, and she was being very loyal to him for 10 years. Like, remember, they've been engaged for 10 years. She was talking about her biological clock and her niece, the daughter of her sister, getting married, and her biological clock ticking like this, like stomping on the ground and everything, and him blowing up saying, oh, I don't need this right now. I got a judge aching to throw me in jail. Some idiot who wants to fight me for $200. Slaughtered pigs, loud whistles. He was having such a mental breakdown because of the little sleep he was having. He was even like asleep in the courtroom. Remember when he had to make his opening statement and he's like, everything that guy just said is bullshit. Thank you. Because he was just like asleep right there. It was funny. It was really hilarious. But yeah, she actually, the actress Marissa Tomei, she was nominated for an Oscar for this movie, Best Supporting Actress, and she won. That was the first time she was nominated, and she won, and deservedly so. She was she was amazing. She did an absolutely phenomenal job in this movie. That was the only Oscar the movie was nominated for, and they won it. I know, like, back then, like, a lot of people didn't want her to win. I didn't think that she deserved it, but I disagree. She definitely she nailed it out of the park in that role. That was awesome. But yeah, are there any other like I really like please would like to know further. Are there any other remarks or things you wanted to say about this movie?
Not that comes to mind at the moment. Nah, I
Awesome.
think we covered pretty much everything.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that that we had you on board for this episode to see your perspective on it. So I wanted to take this time first to talk a little bit more about your YouTube channel. So go ahead and tell us about the content that you have with Realms.
Okay, so essentially, I originally started out my recent YouTube channel because the channel that I had before it, I was making comedy videos, but I always kept like leading back into anime. So eventually I was just like, let me just do like focus on anime, let that be my niche. So now I started making comedy anime content.
Cool, very cool. So yeah, and I definitely want to have you here for episodes of the MGI podcast in the future. But speaking of anime, now you didn't tell me off the record what the next episode is going to be, but it is going to be your choice. So what would you like us to talk about in the next episode of the MGI podcast, Realms?
I want to say this one crazy ass movie. It's called Triangle. It's not anime related, but I'll probably suggest an anime related movie in the future. But definitely check out this movie Triangle because it's kind of mind blowing. Have you seen it?
Triangle. I have not seen it. No. What kind of movie is it?
Essentially, this woman she's going on a boat trip with these people, and they end up running into this storm, and it almost like destroys the boat. They get flipped over. They lose a person.
Oh.
And like they're trying to radio in for help. Nobody's responding, and then the storm clears up, and then this big ass ship pulls up, and they see one person up there. They can't make out who it is or if it's a man or a woman, but at this point, this is the only help that they have. So they end up boarding the ship, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens. I don't want to spoil too much of it. But
okay. So you've seen this movie.
Yes.
Okay, it's not a horror movie, is it? Please tell me it's not a horror movie.
It's kind of creepy. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh,
they get stuck in a loop.
Oh man. Okay. Oh
but
man.
It's like the plot twist at the end that makes it an interesting movie.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely open to new experiences. Watching this movie would certainly be a new experience, and maybe we'll also have Jurassic Mark in on the next episode as well, so we can turn this into a 3-person podcast. But okay, that'll be it. Triangle is going to be the next episode. So that.
And just a heads up for you. It's only scary to a certain point.
Okay.
So after that, you should be good.
So it has horror elements, but the genre itself may not necessarily be horror.
Right.
Okay. That makes me honestly feel much more relieved. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Well, that just about does it for this episode of Movie Guys Improvise. You have been listening to Faerhad Targaryen
and ChillWithRealms.
Thank you all for talking with us today, and catch us again next week.
Peace out, y'all.